I was kind of at the top of the food chain, but I was still settling.
Right.
You know, that's the irony, I think, is that so many of us are settling for something that we're told is success.
So I just want to kind of hone in on a statement that was on your website, Pia, which said, we can't ignore the needs at the top of Maslow's hierarchy. And for those who haven't listened to the Maslow episode yet, it's about self-expression, self-actualization, and fulfillment. So I just wanted to ask, why do you think it's so important for people to pursue those needs at the top of Maslow's hierarchy?
Yeah, so I think, you know, I was thinking about Maslow after I watched your guys' episode on it, and how recently I read that Maslow actually never described the hierarchy in the shape of a triangle.
Right.
So that triangle is actually something that was superimposed on his theory in order to maybe illustrate it more. But I almost have this cynical part of me these days, which is like a borderline conspiracy theorist, where I feel like that could have even been intentional, because if we think back to like the USDA's food pyramid from like the 70s or whenever, you know, they also created a pyramid, and everything at the bottom was basically sugar, and then it was like a red meat and poultry and vegetables, and then fats right at the top. And at the time, I'm going to go on a bit of a tangent here. This is something I do, I've noticed, but just
this is interesting.
No, it's good,
yeah.
So basically, the nutritionists who had developed this food pyramid really wanted to educate the American public on what would be beneficial for them to eat and what quantities. And this food pyramid was really, really illustrative and easy to understand.
Yeah.
And what they realized at the time is that there were good fats and bad fats, but they felt like the public was not going to be able to grasp this kind of distinction between what are good fats for you and what are bad fats for you, which ones should you have and which ones should you avoid. And so they decided to just say fats are bad for you and put them right at the top of the triangle. And when we think of the triangle, it really also illustrates the proportionality of how much we should be eating of each food group. Right? And so when they put the fats right at the top in the little triangle, people really assume like, oh, I should have the least of this, right? And I think that is what has happened with Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Right.
As you so beautifully described, Amanda, is, you know, in Maslow's hierarchy, there is a hierarchy, right? So there are some needs that have this prepotency, which means that if those needs aren't met, like if you are hungry or if you are cold, or if you are, you know, starving, cold, whatever it might be, and those basic physical needs aren't being met, even though your need for purpose is equally strong, equally important, equally potent, those other basic needs will trump that and will make it so that you won't be able to think about the fulfillment or the lack of those needs, because you need to get these other needs met first. But it doesn't mean that those needs are any less important, right? They're not a triangle. It's not proportionally less valid. And I think that's what I really started learning on my journey of finding my purpose and self-actualizing. Is purpose is a human psychological need. Like, it is a defining characteristic of human beings. And when we frame purpose as something that is non-essential, is a luxury, is something that maybe some of us have, or some of us may one day be able to focus on when we've got everything else sorted out, we are doing humanity a huge disservice. Because when we aren't able to meet the psychological need, it's really to our psychological detriment. I mean, people develop depression, they develop anxiety, they feel like something is missing, and they start to numb that feeling to distract themselves with, you know, addictions and dependencies, with behaviors that are really not good for them. And as we know, you know, Descartes' idea of, you know, the mind and the body being totally separate is untrue. And so when we are psychologically unwell, it starts affecting our body. We start having physiological symptoms of unwellness, also not just from the behavior that we're indulging in to numb the other need, but actually because it's really our body is trying to talk to us, literally. So that was super long-winded. Sorry, it is 9
No, I love it. No, I love that connection, because I do the same thing with things where I will see connection between two things, and people are like, "How did you get there?" So I love that. That's right up my alley. But I really love too thinking of all of the needs as equal. And really, you're right that we do, I think our society does look at becoming self-actualized, which sits at the top of Maslow's hierarchy, you know, in the illustration. look at that as a luxury. I like you using that word, the luxury, because I think that people do think that that's just for the privileged people, you know, the people who have all the material needs, all their material needs are met and all this. But, you know, as you were talking about it, I was thinking even, so if your esteem needs, your love needs, your self-actualization needs, if those aren't being met, it could actually cause you to lose or not meet some of your physiological and safety needs, because that might get you to the point where maybe you lose your job and you don't have financial security anymore. And now you don't know how you're going to feed yourself. So that hadn't thought of it that way, that the pyramid could almost flip itself upside down if you're not meeting those upper needs, if we want to call them that. All of a sudden you might find you're not going to meet your basic needs anymore either. And I hadn't really thought of it that way. So thank you for giving me that train of thought.
I actually think that's so profound. And as you were saying that, I was thinking specifically of eating disorders or of behaviors where we're trying to create a sense of control in an environment that feels out of control. So for instance, imagine you grow up in a family home and you don't feel secure in your relationships, or potentially your family lives in poverty and you don't feel safe. Yep. And that informs your lack of esteem. And then later on in life, you are trying to get control, for instance, and you don't eat enough, or you don't feel worthy of love, or you don't feel worthy of a job. You know, you have imposter syndrome. You feel like you're not good enough. I totally agree with you. I think these things can work upwards and downwards.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's awesome.
Amanda will be loving that. Anything to do with Maslow and hashing that out. But that's interesting.
I'm like, all right, I'm going to stop geeking out now. I'll let
I'm with you.
In the chair, just super excited.
I mean, I think that Maslow was so brilliant. And I find that his, you know, this theory that he developed it's so hard to fault. It feels so all-encompassing to me. And like we're doing right now, you can keep finding new dimensions to it. And it's hard to prove it wrong. Like, I don't see how... You know, I think there's a bunch of lay people at the moment who are trying to say that, you know, they've actually not read it the way that you clearly have, and they haven't understood the element of prepotency, and they think that Maslow is saying that you have to meet this, and then only can you meet that, and, you know, only if you have shelter can you meet social needs, etc. And that's not at all what Maslow is saying. I think Maslow had such a nuanced, sensitive understanding of human beings.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, with the food pyramid thing, it's like, I think it's the same thing where people didn't think that everyone would be able to understand his nuanced approach. So they said, okay, we have to put this in a nice little picture.
Right? Yeah.
It doesn't really serve it justice.
Like, dumb it down for people, basically.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. I think that's an important call to action for anything, though, you know, especially popularized models. I think everyone these days would know about Maslow, but go to the source, which is why I liked Amanda ordered, you know, that hard copy of the white paper, and I know you sat there for ages reading through it line by line to really get an understanding of it, but it's just given you that, you know, really detailed understanding, whereas, you know, I've just got that basic pyramid in my head, which is so problematic for people. So I think maybe it is a call to action. I know it's harder, but go back, look at the source material, understand that, because we might be misconstruing what's a beautiful message, like what he originally intended.
I really, really agree. And again, you know, not to bash Google, but it is maybe my favorite hobby right now.
Hey, we all need hobbies, right?
I have noticed that, you know, when you compare the search results on Google versus other search engines, you are more and more getting articles that are written in order to rank highly. So they are literally writing articles now in a way that is not only overusing the keywords that they know people are searching for, but they're actually structuring sentences in a way that is in the way that you might search, and that goes beyond being helpful. It literally goes to a point where it's just trying to get as many hits to their website rather than trying to fully present the truth of a matter. And I think we, you know, to Adam's point, we have to be so intentional these days about making sure we are empowering ourselves with source material and actually spending that time not being lazy and just going to mainstream media, but actually digging and trying to find out what is happening in the world and what is true, because so many things are being dumbed down or being slightly manipulated, or are, you know, we're only getting the clickbait in many ways.
Yes.